Sometimes the door you come to close is the one that opens the truth you were never supposed to find. Rain swept across the south side of Chicago in cold gray sheets, turning sidewalks into mirrors beneath the fading afternoon light. Ethan Walker adjusted the collar of his dark overcoat as he stepped out of a black luxury SUV and stared at the aging brick duplex in front of him. The property sat at the end of a quiet street lined with modest homes, their small front yards glistening beneath the storm. To most people, it looked ordinary. To Ethan, it was another problem on a long list of financial liabilities inherited during his company's recent acquisition of a struggling housing portfolio. The file in his hand was simple. 6 months of missed payments. Multiple warnings. Final notice. As chief executive of one of the largest real estate firms in Illinois, Ethan rarely handled cases like this personally. Lawyers and property managers usually managed the unpleasant details. Yet something had compelled him to visit this address himself. Perhaps it was curiosity. Perhaps it was guilt. Or perhaps it was simply a desire to remember what life looked like beyond skyscrapers and boardrooms. He climbed the worn wooden steps and knocked firmly on the front door. Inside, he heard movement. Small footsteps. A faint laugh. Then silence. The rain continued tapping against the porch roof as Ethan glanced at the eviction documents once more. This was supposed to take 10 minutes. A signature. An explanation. Then he would leave. The lock clicked. Slowly, the door opened. Standing before him was a woman in her mid-30s with warm brown skin and tired but determined eyes. She wore a simple blue sweater and held a folded dish towel in one hand. Despite the strain visible on her face, there was something remarkably composed about her. She did not look defeated. She looked protective. "Can I help you?" she asked politely. Ethan opened the folder. "Vanessa Reed?" The woman nodded. "Yes." Ethan took a breath. "I am Ethan Walker. I represent Walker Residential Holdings." For a brief moment, something flickered across her expression. Not surprise. Recognition. She quickly hid it. "I understand," she said quietly. "May I come in for a moment?" Vanessa hesitated before stepping aside. The house was small but spotless. The scent of tomato soup drifted from the kitchen. Children's drawings decorated the hallway walls. Family photographs sat carefully arranged on shelves. Nothing about the home suggested neglect. Everything suggested love. Ethan was about to explain the purpose of his visit when a burst of laughter echoed from another room. He turned instinctively. 3 children suddenly appeared at the end of the hallway. They could not have been older than 6. Identical curls. Identical smiles. Identical bright eyes filled with curiosity. The triplets froze when they saw a stranger standing inside their home. One little boy peeked from behind his sister. Another child held a stuffed dinosaur beneath one arm. For reasons Ethan could not explain, the sight struck him with unusual force. The room seemed to grow strangely quiet. Rain tapped softly against the windows. Vanessa stepped protectively closer to the children, placing a gentle hand on one small shoulder. Ethan stared at the 3 young faces. Something about them felt familiar. Not recognizable. Familiar. Like a memory buried just beneath the surface of his mind. And as one of the children looked directly into his eyes, Ethan felt the first unsettling crack appear in the certainty he had carried to that doorstep. The rain continued long after Ethan should have left. Instead of discussing paperwork, he found himself sitting at the small kitchen table while the 3 children colored pictures on construction paper nearby. The eviction notice remained inside his folder, untouched. Vanessa poured a cup of coffee and placed it in front of him without a word. The kitchen felt warm compared to the cold afternoon outside. Steam rose from a pot of soup on the stove. Family photographs covered one wall. Ethan noticed that every picture included the children and Vanessa, yet there was never another adult standing beside them. "You have a beautiful family," he said quietly. Vanessa offered a polite smile. "Thank you." One of the little boys suddenly looked up from his drawing. "Mom says we are triplets because we arrived together." His sisters giggled. Ethan smiled despite himself. "That sounds like something your mom would say." The boy grinned proudly before returning to his picture. Ethan watched them for a moment. The strange feeling from earlier had not disappeared. If anything, it had grown stronger. Something about the children felt oddly familiar. Their expressions, their mannerisms. Even the way one girl tilted her head while concentrating reminded him of someone. He simply could not place who. "They seem happy," Ethan said. Vanessa glanced toward her children. Her eyes softened immediately. They are my whole world. The sincerity in her voice filled the room. Ethan believed her instantly. Outside, thunder rolled faintly across the city. Inside, the children continued coloring while rain tapped gently against the windows. How long have you lived here? Ethan asked. Almost 7 years. And you raised them here alone? Vanessa hesitated before nodding. Yes. Ethan looked down at the file in front of him. Numbers, deadlines, missed payments. Corporate language suddenly felt disconnected from reality. The reports had never mentioned children. They had never mentioned a mother working 2 jobs. They had never mentioned a home filled with warmth and determination. They had reduced an entire life to overdue balances. A small voice interrupted his thoughts. Are you famous? One of the girls had climbed into a chair across from him. Ethan laughed softly. Not really. You look like the man in the magazine. She pointed toward a stack of old publications sitting near the refrigerator. Ethan followed her finger. On the cover of a business magazine sat his own photograph. The girl's twin brother immediately ran over. That is him, he announced. I told you. Ethan shook his head, amused. Guilty. The children erupted into excited questions. Did he own skyscrapers? Did he fly on airplanes all the time? Had he ever met a movie star? Vanessa watched the interaction quietly from the sink. For the first time since he arrived, she seemed less guarded. Then Ethan noticed something hanging near the hallway entrance. A silver necklace displayed on a small wooden hook. The sight stopped him cold. His smile faded. The room blurred around the edges. A memory stirred somewhere deep inside his mind. Years ago, a summer evening, music floating through warm air, and a woman wearing that exact necklace. Ethan slowly rose from his chair without realizing it. His eyes remained fixed on the silver pendant. Vanessa turned and saw where he was looking. Instantly, her expression changed. The warmth disappeared. The color drained from her face. And in that single moment, Ethan knew the necklace was not a coincidence. The storm outside gradually softened into a steady drizzle, but inside the small house, tension lingered in the air like an unanswered question. Ethan could not take his eyes off the silver necklace hanging beside the hallway. The pendant was simple, shaped like a tiny crescent moon. Most people would have overlooked it. Ethan could not. Years earlier, during a summer music festival on the shore of Lake Michigan, he had met a woman wearing that exact necklace. He remembered the laughter carried by the wind. He remembered walking beneath strings of lights reflected across the water. Most of all, he remembered how difficult it had been to forget her afterward. Vanessa followed his gaze and quietly crossed the room. Without a word, she removed the necklace from the hook and slipped it into her pocket. The movement was small, but it spoke volumes. Where did you get that? Ethan asked carefully. Vanessa looked toward the children before answering. A long time ago. I think I have seen it before. Maybe you have. Her voice remained calm, yet a wall had suddenly appeared between them. One of the girls tugged gently on Vanessa's sleeve. Mom, can we finish our puzzle? Vanessa smiled immediately, the tension disappearing from her face as she knelt beside the children. Of course. Ethan watched as all 3 children gathered around the coffee table. Their laughter filled the room again. For a moment, he wondered if he was imagining everything. Yet the feeling refused to leave him. The necklace, Vanessa's reaction, the strange familiarity he felt whenever he looked at the triplets. None of it made sense. As the afternoon faded toward evening, Ethan finally opened the folder he had brought with him. The eviction documents suddenly felt heavier than before. Vanessa noticed the papers immediately. You should probably tell me what happens next, she said quietly. Ethan looked down at the forms, then back at the children building a tower from colorful blocks. The company policy is straightforward, he admitted. The property can enter foreclosure proceedings. The words sounded cold even to him. Vanessa nodded slowly. I understand. There was no anger in her voice. No pleading. No attempt to gain sympathy. Somehow that made the situation worse. I have been working extra shifts, she said. I thought I could catch up. Ethan noticed the weariness hidden behind her composed expression. Why did you not ask for assistance? Vanessa smiled faintly. Because there are families dealing with far worse than I am. The answer unsettled him. Most people fought desperately when facing uncertainty. Vanessa simply carried her burden quietly. One of the boys suddenly ran across the room holding a drawing. Look what I made. Ethan accepted the paper. The picture showed a small house beneath a bright yellow sun. 5 stick figures stood together in the front yard. Ethan studied it for a second. Who are they? The boy pointed proudly. That is Mom. That is me. That is my sisters. Then he pointed at the 5th figure. And that is the dad we do not know yet. The room fell silent. Vanessa lowered her eyes. Ethan felt something shift deep inside his chest. The boy's innocent words lingered long after he returned to the puzzle. Outside, the rain finally stopped. A narrow beam of sunlight broke through the clouds and spilled across the living room floor. Ethan glanced once more at Vanessa, and for the first time, he began to wonder whether his arrival at this house had never been about property at all. Over the next several days, Ethan found reasons to return to the duplex far more often than company policy required. At first, he told himself he was reviewing options for the property. Then he claimed he was investigating financial assistance programs. Eventually, even he stopped pretending. The truth was simple. He wanted answers. On a bright Saturday morning, sunlight poured through the neighborhood after nearly a week of rain. Children rode bicycles along the sidewalk while families worked in small front gardens. Ethan parked across the street and watched the duplex for a moment before walking toward the front porch. This time, the triplets greeted him before he even reached the door. Mr. Ethan, one of the girls called excitedly. The 3 children ran toward him carrying a soccer ball. Vanessa appeared behind them, looking surprised. You seem popular, she said. Ethan smiled. Apparently. Before she could object, the children had already convinced him to join a game in the small backyard. For the next hour, laughter replaced questions. Ethan chased soccer balls across uneven grass, listened to endless stories about school projects, and learned that one child wanted to become a veterinarian while another dreamed of being an astronaut. Vanessa watched from the porch steps, arms folded loosely across her sweater. Every now and then, she smiled despite herself. It was a side of Ethan she had never expected to see. Later that afternoon, while the children worked on homework inside, Vanessa sat at the kitchen table, sorting bills and paperwork. Ethan noticed the stack immediately. You do not have to handle everything alone, he said quietly. Vanessa continued organizing documents. I have handled everything alone for a long time. That does not mean you should. She looked up. For a moment, neither spoke. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, casting soft patterns across the table between them. Why are you really here? She asked. Ethan hesitated. The question felt larger than before. I am not sure anymore, he admitted. Vanessa studied him carefully. She had learned long ago that sincerity often revealed itself in what people could not say rather than what they could. Before she could respond, one of the children ran into the kitchen carrying an old photo album. Mom, look what we found. The triplets climbed onto chairs and began flipping through faded photographs. Ethan glanced at the pages casually at first. Then one image caught his attention. His breath stopped. The photograph showed a summer festival beside Lake Michigan nearly 7 years earlier. Strings of lights stretched above a crowded boardwalk. Music performers stood on a distant stage. And near the center of the picture stood a younger Vanessa wearing the silver crescent moon necklace. Ethan remembered that night instantly. He remembered their conversations, their laughter, the feeling that meeting her had mattered. Where did you get this? He asked softly. Vanessa slowly closed the album. The warmth that had filled the room disappeared. The children sensed the change and grew quiet. Ethan looked from the photograph to Vanessa. Pieces of a forgotten story were beginning to align in ways he could no longer ignore. And for the first time, Vanessa realized the past she had worked so hard to protect might not remain hidden much longer. That evening, after the children had gone to bed, the house settled into a rare silence. A small lamp glowed in the corner of the living room, while rainwater still clung to the windows from the earlier storm. Vanessa sat at the kitchen table holding a mug of tea long after it had cooled. Across from her, Ethan stared at the old photograph resting between them. Neither had spoken for several minutes. The image seemed to carry the weight of an entire chapter of their lives. I remember that night, Ethan finally said. His voice was quiet. The festival by the lake. The live music. The food trucks. You told me your favorite place in the city was the waterfront after sunset. Vanessa lowered her eyes. I remember. Ethan studied her carefully. Why did you never contact me? Vanessa released a slow breath. She had known this question would eventually arrive. Because life became complicated. Ethan glanced toward the hallway where the children slept. Complicated enough to disappear? A faint smile crossed Vanessa's face, but there was sadness behind it. You were building an empire. I was trying to survive. The honesty of the answer settled heavily between them. Ethan looked down at the photograph again. 7 years. 7 years of missed birthdays. Missed milestones. Missed opportunities. To know the people sleeping under this roof. Yet something still did not fully connect. There were pieces of the puzzle missing. Before he could ask another question, soft footsteps echoed from the hallway. One of the boys appeared wearing dinosaur pajamas and carrying a blanket. "Mom?" he asked sleepily. Vanessa immediately stood. "What is it, sweetheart?" The little boy rubbed his eyes and pointed toward the kitchen table. "Can I show Mr. Ethan my project tomorrow?" Ethan smiled. "I would like that." The boy grinned and shuffled closer. Then he placed a small hand on Ethan's arm. The gesture lasted only a second, but it struck Ethan unexpectedly. The child trusted him. Not because of money. Not because of status. Simply because he had shown up. Vanessa gently guided her son back toward his bedroom. Ethan remained seated, staring at the family photographs on the wall. When she returned several minutes later, he noticed something tucked inside the open photo album. A folded newspaper clipping. Without thinking, he picked it up. The article featured a younger Vanessa holding 3 newborn babies wrapped in matching blankets. The date immediately caught his attention. Ethan felt his heart begin to race. He counted backward in his mind. 7 years. Almost exactly 7 years. The timeline aligned with the summer they had met. Slowly, he looked up at Vanessa. She saw the article in his hand and froze. Neither moved. Neither spoke. The ticking clock above the refrigerator suddenly sounded louder than before. Ethan looked at the photograph of the newborn triplets, then at the hallway where the children slept. 1,000 questions flooded his mind at once. Vanessa's eyes filled with emotion she had managed to hide for years. She knew the moment had finally arrived. The truth she had protected was no longer hidden behind time or distance. Ethan set the newspaper clipping carefully back onto the table. His voice was barely above a whisper. "Vanessa," he said, unable to look away from her. "Tell me what I am starting to understand." The clock continued ticking softly as Vanessa sat across from Ethan beneath the warm glow of the kitchen lamp. For several seconds, neither spoke. Outside, the neighborhood had fallen silent. Inside, 7 years of unspoken truth waited between them. Vanessa folded her hands together and stared at the table. "I found out I was pregnant a few weeks after the festival," she said quietly. Ethan remained motionless. Every word seemed to land with the weight of an entire lifetime. "I tried to reach you at first," Vanessa continued. "But your company had just expanded nationally. Every article I read talked about your success, your travel schedule, your future. The more I looked at your world, the more I felt like I did not belong in it." Ethan lowered his eyes. "You should have told me." Vanessa nodded slowly. "Maybe I should have, but I was scared. And then the doctors told me I was expecting 3 babies instead of 1. A faint smile touched her lips as she glanced toward the hallway. Everything changed after that. Ethan imagined her facing those months alone. Doctor appointments. Sleepless nights. Financial uncertainty. The responsibility of preparing for 3 children at once. The thought left him speechless. "Why did you never ask for help?" he finally whispered. Vanessa looked directly at him. "Because I wanted them to grow up knowing they were loved, not knowing they were unwanted." The answer broke something inside him. Ethan looked toward the family photographs covering the wall. Every birthday party. Every school event. Every Christmas morning. Entire chapters of life had unfolded without him. Not because he chose to leave, but because he never knew he was supposed to stay. The realization hurt more than he expected. "Do they know?" he asked. Vanessa shook her head. "No. They only know that someday they might meet their father." Silence returned. Then footsteps echoed softly from the hallway. One by one, the triplets appeared at the entrance. Sleepy eyes. Pajamas. Blankets trailing behind them. The little girl rubbed her eyes and looked between Ethan and her mother. "Is everything okay?" she asked. Vanessa immediately smiled. "Everything is fine, sweetheart." The children shuffled closer. One of the boys climbed onto Ethan's lap without hesitation, holding a stuffed dinosaur beneath his arm. Ethan froze. The trust felt overwhelming. The child leaned comfortably against him as though it were the most natural thing in the world. The second boy pointed toward the old photograph still resting on the table. "Mom loves that picture," he said proudly. "She keeps it because it reminds her of the happiest day ever." Ethan looked at Vanessa. Tears glistened in her eyes, though she quickly brushed them away. Not tears of sadness. Tears of exhaustion from carrying the same secret for years. The little girl suddenly tilted her head. "Mr. Ethan?" she asked. "Yes. Will you come back tomorrow?" Ethan felt his throat tighten. For a moment, he could not answer. Then he smiled gently. "If your mom says it is okay, I would like that very much." The children grinned. Vanessa watched the exchange quietly. For the first time since Ethan arrived at her doorstep, the fear she had carried for 7 years began to loosen its grip. And as the triplets gathered around him, laughing and sharing stories about school and soccer practice, Ethan realized the truth was no longer the most important discovery of the night. The most important discovery was that 3 children he had only just met were already beginning to feel like home. The weeks that followed changed the rhythm of every life connected to the little duplex. Ethan kept his promise and returned the next day. Then the day after that. And the day after that. At first, he arrived carrying simple things. A science kit for a school project. A new soccer ball after the old one wore out. Books he thought the children might enjoy. Vanessa noticed that he never brought anything extravagant. He seemed determined to earn a place in their lives rather than purchase one. The triplets made that surprisingly easy. Before long, they were waiting by the front window every afternoon, eager to see whether Ethan's black SUV would appear at the end of the street. One Saturday morning, he helped them build a birdhouse in the backyard. The project took twice as long as expected because everyone insisted on offering opinions. Paint ended up on shirts, shoes, and even Ethan's hands. By lunchtime, the birdhouse leaned slightly to one side, but the children treated it like a masterpiece. Vanessa watched from the porch with a glass of iced tea in her hand. The sight felt almost unreal. For years, every responsibility had rested on her shoulders alone. Now she was watching someone willingly share the weight. Later that afternoon, Ethan attended the children's soccer game at a local park. Folding chairs lined the sidelines while parents cheered from beneath bright blue skies. Ethan sat beside Vanessa on a worn aluminum bench. The triplets waved enthusiastically every time they looked in their direction. "They are happy when you are here," Vanessa said quietly. Ethan kept his eyes on the field. "I am happy when I am here too." The honesty of the answer lingered between them. Neither looked away from the game. Neither seemed ready to discuss what those words truly meant. As spring gradually turned toward summer, Ethan found himself rearranging business meetings so he could attend school events and community activities. He learned favorite foods, favorite colors, favorite bedtime stories. He learned that one child was terrified of thunderstorms while another secretly collected rocks from every playground they visited. Small details, precious details, the kind a father should know. One evening, after helping with homework at the kitchen table, Ethan discovered an envelope tucked inside his briefcase. The children had slipped it there without telling him. Inside was a handmade card covered in colorful drawings. Across the front, written in uneven handwriting, were 6 simple words. "Thank you for being here." Ethan stared at the card long after he returned home. His luxury penthouse overlooked the Chicago skyline, yet it had never felt as empty as it did that night. He placed the card on his desk and realized that no business award, no magazine cover, and no financial milestone had ever moved him the way those 6 words did. The following morning, he made a decision. The foreclosure process would stop immediately, not temporarily, permanently. But as he prepared to share the news with Vanessa, another realization settled heavily in his heart. Saving the house was easy. Earning complete trust from the woman who had protected that family for 7 years would be the challenge that mattered most. Summer arrived carrying long evenings and warm sunlight across the neighborhood, but uncertainty still lingered over the row of aging homes surrounding Vanessa's duplex. One afternoon, flyers appeared on front porches announcing a redevelopment proposal. A large investment group had purchased several nearby properties and planned to replace much of the neighborhood with luxury condominiums. Residents gathered on sidewalks reading the notices with concern. Families who had lived there for decades suddenly faced an uncertain future. Vanessa stood on her porch holding one of the flyers while the triplets played nearby. She understood immediately what the proposal could mean. Rising property values, increased taxes, pressure that many families would struggle to survive. By sunset, neighbors filled a local community center to discuss their options. Voices blended together in worried conversations. Parents spoke about schools, Elderly residents spoke about memories. Small business owners spoke about survival. Vanessa listened quietly from the back of the room. Then the doors opened. Ethan stepped inside. Several people recognized him immediately. After all, he was one of the city's most successful real estate executives. The room grew noticeably quieter. Some residents assumed he had come to support the redevelopment. Others expected him to defend the investors. Instead, Ethan walked directly to the front of the room and asked for a microphone. "I know many of you are worried," he began. "And you have every reason to be." The audience remained silent. Ethan took a breath. "But this neighborhood is not a collection of buildings. It is a community. It is families. It is history. And I will not support any project that destroys that." Murmurs spread through the crowd. Vanessa stared at him in surprise. Ethan continued speaking. He announced that his company would withdraw from any partnership connected to the redevelopment plan. More importantly, he revealed a new initiative designed to preserve affordable housing throughout the area. The room erupted into applause. Some people looked relieved. Others looked stunned. Ethan was using his influence to protect the neighborhood instead of profit from it. Later that evening, after the meeting ended, families gathered outside beneath strings of lights hanging across the community center courtyard. Children chased one another through the grass, while neighbors celebrated the unexpected victory. Vanessa found Ethan standing alone near a fence overlooking the park. "You did not have to do that," she said softly. Ethan smiled. "Yes, I did." She studied him carefully. "Why?" Ethan glanced toward the triplets laughing with friends beneath the lights. "Because for most of my life, I measured success by what I could build." He looked back at her. "You taught me that success is really about what you protect." For a moment, neither spoke. The sounds of the celebration drifted around them. Vanessa felt something shift inside her. Not because Ethan had saved the neighborhood, not because he had saved her house, but because his actions finally matched his words. Across the courtyard, one of the triplets waved excitedly. "Mr. Ethan." The children ran toward them, carrying paper lanterns from the celebration. Without hesitation, Ethan knelt beside them and helped light each lantern. Warm golden light illuminated their smiling faces. Vanessa watched the scene quietly. 7 years earlier, she had lost faith that this future was even possible. Now she stood beneath a summer sky watching the people she loved laugh together. And for the first time, she allowed herself to imagine that the family they were becoming might actually last. Autumn arrived quietly, painting the neighborhood with shades of gold and amber as leaves drifted across sidewalks that now felt more familiar than ever. Nearly a year had passed since Ethan first knocked on Vanessa's door, carrying an eviction notice. The irony was not lost on either of them. The man who had arrived prepared to take away a home had become one of the reasons it remained standing. On a bright Saturday afternoon, neighbors gathered for a community celebration in the small park near the duplex. Children ran between tables decorated with handmade banners. Music floated through the air. Families shared food and stories beneath a sky so clear it seemed to stretch forever. Vanessa stood beside a picnic table helping organize desserts while the triplets raced across the grass with their friends. Every few minutes one of them would run back to report some important discovery before rushing away again. Their laughter had become the soundtrack of her life. Ethan arrived carrying a large cardboard box. The children immediately surrounded him. "What is it?" they asked in unison. Ethan laughed. "Open it and find out." Inside were dozens of photographs collected throughout the year. Soccer games, school plays, backyard projects, birthday celebrations, community events. Hundreds of moments captured and preserved. The triplets flipped through the pictures excitedly while Vanessa watched from a distance. One photograph caught her attention. It showed all 5 of them sitting around the kitchen table eating pancakes on a rainy morning. Nobody had been looking at the camera. Nobody had posed. They were simply together. Vanessa felt emotion rise unexpectedly in her chest. That single photograph represented something she had not allowed herself to hope for in a very long time. Later that evening, as the celebration began winding down, the sky turned shades of orange and pink above the park. Families gradually headed home. The triplets remained nearby, playing beneath a large oak tree. Ethan and Vanessa walked slowly toward a quiet corner overlooking the neighborhood. Warm light stretched across the rooftops. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence felt comfortable, familiar. "Do you remember the first day you came to the house?" Vanessa asked softly. Ethan smiled. I remember every detail. She laughed. I was convinced you would leave and never come back. Ethan looked toward the children. I am grateful that I did. He reached into his jacket pocket and removed a small silver key attached to his simple keychain. Vanessa recognized it immediately. What is this? She asked. The house, Ethan said. The property title was transferred 6 months ago. Vanessa stared at him in surprise. What? Ethan shook his head gently. Not as a gift. Not as charity. The trust that owns the Neighborhood Preservation Program transferred ownership to the families who lived there longest. You earned it long before I arrived. Vanessa held the key in her hand. For several seconds, she could not speak. The little duplex that had sheltered her family through every challenge now truly belonged to them. Ethan stepped closer. You taught me what home actually means, he said quietly. Vanessa looked up at him. Years of fear, uncertainty, and sacrifice seemed to soften beneath the warmth in his eyes. Nearby, the triplets continued laughing beneath the fading sunlight. The future stretched before them, no longer defined by secrets or missed opportunities. Vanessa smiled. Then she gently placed one hand against Ethan's cheek. He leaned forward, and beneath the golden glow of the setting sun, they shared a tender kiss filled not with promises of perfection, but with gratitude, trust, and hope. Behind them, the children cheered loudly after spotting the moment. Ethan and Vanessa laughed as the triplets came running toward them. Together they stood beneath the autumn sky, surrounded by the neighborhood they had helped protect, finally understanding that a family is not built by circumstance alone. It is built day by day, choice by choice, until one day it becomes the place where every heart belongs.